There's a strange feeling that takes over you when your entire world begins to shift under your feet, and you don't even realize it's happening. It's like watching your reflection in a mirror as the image starts to warp, and for a moment, you wonder if you're the one changing, or if the mirror itself is cracking. I didn't plan for any of this. Honestly, I didn't even see it coming. One minute, I was mindlessly scrolling through my phone, catching up on emails, when I came across a strange message. It wasn't from my wife, Clara, but it was about her. The name was unfamiliar, Kelsey. I figured it was a work-related message, maybe from one of her colleagues. But something in the way the text was phrased made me pause. It wasn't just a random exchange. It was clear this person had been keeping tabs on Clara. The message was brief, and it simply said, "She's not who you think she is. Check the video before it's too late." I thought it was spam at first, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was something more. You know how some things are too strange to ignore? That was one of those moments. So, like an idiot, I opened the link, and what I saw next made my stomach drop. It was a video, a blurry, shaky shot, but unmistakable. Clara, my wife of 5 years, was in it, laughing, in a bar I didn't recognize, sitting too close to a man I'd never seen before. They were flirting. It wasn't the kind of harmless conversation you'd have with a friend. No, it was something else entirely. The way she touched his arm, the way they leaned into each other. It wasn't a random moment. This wasn't just friends having drinks. I felt a jolt in my chest. Anger, confusion, betrayal. I immediately tried to shake the feeling off, telling myself it could be nothing. Maybe it wasn't her. Maybe the video was old, edited, manipulated. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. It was Clara, and something inside me snapped. I couldn't just pretend like everything was fine. But what was I supposed to do? Confront her immediately? It seemed too soon, too rash. I needed to understand what I was dealing with first. The next day, I made a decision. I had to find out more. I couldn't just sit there, hoping this would all blow over. So I did what anyone would do when they're desperate for answers. I started looking through her things. Her phone, her purse, the computer. Each time, my heart raced, my hands shaking as I opened her texts, her emails, anything that could explain what I had just seen. That's when I found more. A series of messages, all from Kelsey, the same name from the text. But these weren't random conversations. They were detailed exchanges, talking about meeting up, planning dates, and even discussing some intimate moments. I should have felt sick. I should have been furious. But instead, a strange calmness took over. I had the proof, the evidence. This was happening. My wife was having an affair. And yet, I wasn't ready to confront her. I wasn't ready to lose my temper or scream at her. No, I needed to do something different. I needed to have control over the situation. This wasn't just about anger. It was about showing her the consequences of her actions. I wanted her to understand that nothing was going to happen without me being in control. I kept quiet. I didn't confront Clara that night, even though the video haunted me. I didn't confront her the next day either. I watched her, observed her, like a silent observer in my own home. I pretended everything was fine. And the more I watched her, the more I realized how effortless she made it look. The lies, the deceit, the manipulation. One day, I decided to take it a step further. I started following her. Just a few casual outings at first, trying to see who she was meeting, where she was going. It wasn't paranoia, it was a need for answers. If she was hiding something, I was going to find out what it was. But that wasn't the most shocking part. No, the most shocking part came when I followed her one evening to a park on the outskirts of town. I wasn't expecting to see anything out of the ordinary. Just a regular evening, right? But then I saw them. Clara and the man from the video, Elias. They weren't sitting in the park. They were standing close, whispering to each other. At first, I thought I was just imagining things. But then Elias touched her face. Slowly, gently. His fingers traced her jawline, and Clara didn't pull away. She didn't hesitate. My blood ran cold. I had to keep watching, keep this sick feeling of betrayal locked inside me. I wanted to walk over there, confront them both. But I held back. I wanted to see what would happen next. And that's when it all changed. Clara kissed him. Right there, in the park, in the open. She kissed him like she'd never kissed me. Like she had no care in the world. I stood frozen, my mind reeling, my body shaking with a mix of rage and heartbreak. I should have felt the weight of betrayal crush me then. But what hit me harder was the realization that I was no longer the man I once was. I was someone different. Someone who would make sure Clara understood the consequences of her actions. I wasn't going to let this slide. Not after everything. Not after all the lies. Not after what I saw. I turned away, my mind already planning the next steps. The game was on, and I wasn't going to lose. For days, I didn't know what to do with myself. The images of Clara and Elias haunted me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. Kissing in the park, their bodies pressed together like they were meant to be there. The betrayal wasn't just in the video I'd found, or in the text that confirmed it. It was in the fact that I'd never seen it coming. I had loved Clara with everything I had. I had trusted her. And yet, there they were, in plain sight, taking everything I had built with her and throwing it away. But I wasn't just angry. I was calculating. I had the upper hand now. I had evidence. And for the first time in my life, I realized that I didn't need to confront her immediately. I didn't need to let her know I was watching. I could play this game on my terms. I spent the next few days in silence, acting as though everything was fine. I kept up with the mundane routine of life, going to work, cooking dinner, cleaning the house. But behind every action, every smile, there was a plan brewing in my head. I knew Clara would come back to me. She always did. She'd apologize, make excuses, maybe even deny it all. But this time, I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I needed to show her that I wasn't just some fool who'd sit back and accept the lies. The next weekend, Clara wanted us to spend some time together. She suggested a trip to a cabin in the woods, something to reconnect. I couldn't believe the audacity. Here she was, still trying to salvage something, trying to act like nothing had changed. But I agreed, thinking it would be the perfect opportunity to carry out my plan. We drove up to the cabin, nestled in the mountains, far away from everything and everyone. A beautiful place, secluded, peaceful. On the surface, it looked like the perfect weekend getaway for a couple in love. But underneath, there was tension, palpable, suffocating. Clara kept talking about how much she missed our time together, how she wanted us to be close again. She tried so hard to be affectionate, but it was forced. I could see right through it. Every hug, every kiss felt like a lie. She wasn't trying to reconnect with me. She was trying to hide her guilt, to bury the truth of what she'd been doing. That night, I went to bed earlier than usual. I pretended to fall asleep, but I wasn't resting. I was waiting. I knew she wouldn't be able to resist. It was inevitable. When I heard the soft creak of the door opening, I held my breath. My heart pounded as I waited. Clara slipped out of the bed quietly, not wanting to wake me. But I wasn't asleep. I followed her silently, my steps soft as I trailed behind her through the dark cabin. She didn't make it far. Just outside the cabin, in the small porch area, I saw her. She was on the phone, her voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't hear the words, but I could tell by the way she was standing, the way she held herself. This was no business call. No, this was something else entirely. The way she laughed, the way she bit her lip, it was obvious. She was talking to Elias. My chest tightened. The anger that had been building in me for days suddenly surged. Every inch of me wanted to storm out there, confront her, demand answers. But I stayed in the shadows. I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. She had no idea I was there, and that was exactly how I wanted it. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, watching her talk, watching her smile like she had done nothing wrong. Eventually, she hung up and went back inside. I didn't follow her immediately. I let her believe she'd gotten away with it. The next morning, Clara was the picture of innocence. She made breakfast, served it with a smile, and asked how I slept. I nodded, playing my part. But deep down, I was seething. I had her. She had no idea what was coming. We spent the day hiking, walking through the woods as if everything were normal. But every moment, every step we took felt like a performance. Clara talked about how peaceful it was, how we needed more moments like this. But I couldn't hear her words over the pounding of my heart. I had the power now. I could end this at any moment. I could confront her, expose everything, and watch as she crumbled. But I wasn't ready yet. I needed more. I needed her to crack on her own. That night, I didn't go to sleep early. I stayed up, pretending to be asleep as I waited for the inevitable. Clara slipped out of bed again. This time, I followed her. But I wasn't alone. I'd made sure of that. When Clara stepped outside, she wasn't talking to Elias on the phone. She was meeting him. I had seen enough. This was no longer just a suspicion. This was real. She had been seeing him, and she thought I didn't know. I watched as she kissed him, the same kiss I had seen in the video. She pulled him in close, the way she used to pull me in before everything started to change. I stood there, frozen, watching the woman I thought I knew, the woman I had loved, betray me right before my eyes. And that's when I decided it was time. I didn't go to her. I didn't confront them. I didn't shout or scream. I didn't need to. I had a plan. The next few days were a blur of careful observation. Clara was unaware of my growing certainty, my tightening grip on the truth. We went back to our daily routines, and she continued her charade, trying to act as if nothing had changed. She was pretending that our marriage was still whole, that the foundation we had built together hadn't started crumbling beneath her feet. But I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't the same. She wasn't my Clara anymore. She was someone else entirely, a stranger, someone who could look me in the eyes and lie without hesitation. I didn't let on. I played my part as the dutiful husband, the one who went along with her plans, smiled at her jokes, and kissed her goodbye in the morning as if everything was fine. But in my mind, I was calculating. I was gathering information. I was taking notes of every small detail that didn't add up. Then one evening, I decided it was time to take things further. I couldn't keep pretending like I didn't know what was going on. Clara was scheduled to go out for a girls' night, one of those things she used to do often, a way for her to unwind. She always told me it was just some drinks with friends, but I knew better now. I knew exactly who she was meeting, and it wasn't anyone from her girls' group. I had been tracking her schedule for weeks, piecing together the lies she'd been telling me. And now, I was going to follow her. I had to know exactly how far she was willing to take this affair. I waited until she left, her car disappearing down the street, before I quietly slipped out of the house myself. I didn't follow her immediately. I let her think she was getting away with it. I knew she'd be meeting Elias. I just needed to find out where. As soon as I pulled out of the driveway, I followed her at a distance, making sure to stay out of sight. The drive was longer than I expected, and I had no idea where we were headed. But then, when we reached the outskirts of town, I saw the familiar shape of a small bar on the corner. It wasn't a place I would have expected Clara to frequent, but there it was, the sign hanging above the door. I knew this was where they'd meet. I parked a block away, far enough so that she wouldn't notice me, but close enough that I could keep an eye on everything. I watched as Clara entered the bar, her posture confident, her step light. And there, standing outside, was Elias, waiting for her. I knew it was him even before he turned around. He had this smug air about him, like he knew exactly what was happening and had no shame in it. They greeted each other with a hug, a quick, friendly embrace. But the way they stood there, the way they looked at each other, there was something more than just friendship. I watched them through the window, my pulse quickening with every passing second. They talked for a while, their conversation seemingly casual. But then, something changed. They leaned in closer, and for a brief moment, Clara's hand brushed Elias's. I saw the way she looked at him. That look of someone who had been hiding something, someone who was ashamed but not enough to stop. I couldn't take it anymore. I wasn't just standing there, watching them. I wasn't the same person who had walked into this situation with doubts and suspicions. No, I was someone different now. Someone who wasn't afraid to face the truth, no matter how much it hurt. I wasn't going to let her keep deceiving me. I wasn't going to let her believe she could get away with this. I walked into the bar. The moment I stepped inside, I saw them, Clara and Elias, sitting at a small table in the corner. Clara looked up, her eyes wide when she saw me. She didn't know how to react. The color drained from her face, and for a moment, she froze. Elias, on the other hand, was far more composed. He didn't look surprised, didn't look guilty. In fact, there was a look of smug satisfaction on his face as he looked up at me. I walked toward them, my steps deliberate, my mind clear. When I reached their table, I didn't say a word at first. I just stared at Clara, the woman who had promised me forever, the woman I had trusted above anyone else, now sitting across from another man as if everything were normal. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Clara opened her mouth, but no words came out. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to explain what I was seeing with my own eyes. Finally, I broke the silence. So this is how it's going to be, huh? You're going to pretend like nothing's wrong? Like I don't know what's been happening behind my back? Clara's face flushed with embarrassment, but she didn't answer. Elias, on the other hand, leaned back in his chair, as if this was nothing to him. Look, man, he said, his voice calm, almost bored, she's my girlfriend now. You can't just keep holding on to something that's over. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It wasn't just an affair anymore. Clara had crossed a line. She was with him, and he didn't even care to hide it. He wasn't even ashamed. And Clara? She was sitting there, unable to defend herself, unable to say anything that could make this better. She had nothing left to say. I leaned in, locking eyes with her. You think I don't know? I saw the video. I know everything, Clara. The lies. The secrets. The betrayal. Her eyes widened in shock, and for the first time, I saw something other than guilt in her eyes. Fear. She was terrified, and that was exactly how I wanted her to feel. I turned to Elias, my voice low and controlled. You think you've won? You think you can take everything from me without any consequences? Well, let me tell you something. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. I left the bar without looking back. The cold night air felt like a relief as I walked away from the scene, the weight of the confrontation still pressing down on my chest. But in that moment, something changed. I wasn't just the betrayed husband anymore. I wasn't the one sitting in the shadows, waiting for an answer. Now, I was the one in control. And I wasn't going to stop until Clara and Elias understood just how far I was willing to go to make sure they paid for what they'd done. The drive back home was nothing short of surreal. The images of Clara and Elias in the bar played on loop in my mind, each one more vivid than the last. It was like I had stepped into a nightmare that I couldn't escape, only to realize that I was the one in control of it now. The confrontation had gone differently than I had imagined. Clara's wide-eyed shock, Elias's smug indifference. It was as though they were both living in a different world, one where there were no consequences for their actions. But that was about to change. When I walked into the house, everything was still. There was an eerie silence that filled the air, as if the house itself knew something had shifted. Clara was sitting on the couch, her phone in her hands, her head down, pretending to focus on something. The moment I entered the living room, she looked up, her eyes darting to me, a mixture of guilt and fear flashing across her face before she quickly masked it with a forced smile. "Hey," she said softly, her voice shaky. "I didn't expect you to be back so soon. How was your drive?" I didn't answer her right away. Instead, I walked over to the kitchen, grabbed a glass of water, and took a slow sip. Every movement felt deliberate, like I was acting in a play and I was controlling every scene. I wasn't going to let her off easy. She had betrayed me, not just once, but repeatedly. Now, I was going to make her face the consequences. When I finally spoke, my voice was cold, calculated. "You can stop pretending now, Clara. I saw you. I saw everything. I know about Elias. I know about the calls, the texts, the dates. You're not fooling anyone anymore." Clara's face drained of color, and for a moment, I thought she might break down in front of me. But then, just as quickly, she stiffened, her expression hardening. "I didn't think you'd find out this way," she said, her words barely above a whisper. "I was going to tell you. I really was. But you wouldn't understand." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was still trying to justify it. "Tell me? Tell me what? That you've been sleeping with another man behind my back for months? That you've been lying to me every single day? Do you think I'm stupid?" Her eyes flickered with something. Shame, regret, maybe even guilt, but she quickly pushed it aside. "I never wanted to hurt you. It just happened. I didn't mean for things to go this far." The anger inside me bubbled up, but I forced myself to stay calm. I couldn't let her see how much this was destroying me. "Not yet. You didn't mean for it to go this far? Clara, you've been planning this. You've been hiding it from me. And now you're sitting here trying to tell me that it just happened." I shook my head, incredulous. "No, I don't believe you." Clara stood up, her movements shaky. She walked over to me, her hands trembling as she reached out to touch my arm. "Nathan, please. I'm sorry. I am. But you have to understand, I don't know what happened. I didn't want to lose you, but I felt so alone. You were always so distant. And Elias, he made me feel wanted. He listened to me. Something I haven't felt in a long time." The words stung, cutting deeper than I wanted to admit. I had been distant. I had been focused on work, on everything else but her. But that wasn't an excuse for what she had done. So this was my fault. I asked, my voice quieter now. "Because I was busy? You thought it was okay to cheat? To lie to me? To betray me like this?" She flinched, and for a brief moment, I saw the crack in her armor. She was sorry, I could tell. But sorry wasn't going to fix this. Sorry wasn't going to undo the damage. I couldn't just forgive her, not like this. I don't know what you want from me, Nathan, she said, her voice barely audible. What do you want me to say? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked past her, pacing the room, trying to collect my thoughts. I had to think clearly. I had to make sure that whatever came next, I was in control. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me, or Elias, or anyone else for that matter. They thought they could get away with it. But I was going to make sure they knew exactly what it cost to betray me. Clara, I said, finally turning to face her. You think I don't know? You think I didn't hear all the things you said to him? All the things you told him about me? How you were going to leave me? How you were done with our marriage? Her eyes went wide, and she opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She had no defense, no explanation that would make it right. I could see the guilt weighing on her, but it didn't matter. It was too late for apologies now. Too late for excuses. I've been thinking about this, I continued, my voice steady, about what I'm going to do, and I've made up my mind. Clara stepped forward, her face desperate now. Nathan, please, don't. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I'll do anything to make it right. I shook my head slowly, cutting her off. You've had your chances, Clara. You've made your choices. And now, it's my turn. I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do, but I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Clara and Elias had thought they could play me for a fool. But I wasn't just some guy who would let them walk away without facing the consequences of their actions. I wasn't done yet. And I wasn't going to let Clara's lies define me. The night hung heavy in the air, the silence between Clara and me almost suffocating. I couldn't tell if it was the weight of the betrayal or the unspoken tension that had settled in the house, but I knew one thing. Everything had changed. I wasn't the same person who had walked into that bar, the one who still clung to the idea of saving our marriage. No, I had shed that person. The man who had trusted Clara completely, the man who had believed in us, was gone. What remained was someone who had seen through the facade, someone who was no longer willing to be a victim in his own life. Clara stood there, frozen, waiting for some kind of reaction from me. She looked desperate, like she thought this was just some temporary storm we would weather and move past. But she was wrong. I couldn't go back to who I was before. There was no turning back from the truth. I had seen her, not just in the bar, but in her lies, her manipulation, and her complete disregard for the bond we once shared. I took a deep breath, my voice calm but firm as I looked her in the eyes. You don't get to decide when it's over, Clara. You've made your choices, and now it's time to deal with the consequences. But I'm not going to make it easy for you. You thought you could sneak around, play both sides, but you're not fooling me anymore. Clara's expression twisted between regret and confusion. She stepped closer to me, her hand outstretched as though she could still reach the man she had betrayed. Please, Nathan, I didn't want it to be this way. I never meant to hurt you. I've been so lost, so lonely, and Elias he was there for me. He understood me. I don't know what happened. I thought we could work through it, but I couldn't. I couldn't face the truth. And I couldn't face you. I flinched at her words, the hurt seeping in despite the wall I had built up around myself. But I refused to let it show. I couldn't afford to let her think she could manipulate me with apologies and crocodile tears. She had taken everything from me, and now she was trying to play the victim. You don't get to blame me for your choices, I said, my voice low but unwavering. You're the one who chose to betray me, not once, but over and over. You chose him, and now you'll have to deal with the consequences of those choices. Clara's face crumpled, and for a moment, I almost felt a flicker of sympathy. Almost. But it didn't last. Not after everything. Not after seeing the way she had looked at Elias, the way she had kissed him. This wasn't some momentary lapse. It was something much deeper, something she had been hiding for far too long. I turned away from her, needing space, needing to think. The weight of what I had just confronted was overwhelming, but I knew I couldn't let my guard down. This wasn't over. It couldn't be. There were too many loose ends, too many things that Clara thought she could get away with. The next few days passed in a blur. I didn't speak to Clara much. I couldn't. Every time I looked at her, I saw the woman who had lied to me, the woman who had betrayed everything we had built together. There was no room for forgiveness yet. Not now, and not until I had control of this situation. I needed to understand everything. I needed to know how far she had gone, what she had been hiding, and why she had chosen Elias over me. It was on the third day after the confrontation that I decided to take the next step. I knew Clara would be at work, and this was my chance. I had been keeping an eye on her phone, her texts, her emails, but now I needed to go deeper. I needed answers from the source. I sat down at her desk, my hands steady as I searched through her personal things. I knew it was a violation of trust, but I had no choice. I had to know the full extent of what was happening. And when I found it, I nearly lost control. There it was, a series of emails between Clara and Elias. They had been planning everything. The meetings, the trips, the texts that made it clear this wasn't just an affair. This was something else, something that had been brewing for months. They had talked about leaving me. Clara had even started making excuses about our marriage, how she thought we had grown apart, how she felt unappreciated. But the worst part? The emails were full of plans. They were planning their future together, making arrangements for a life that didn't include me. I had never felt more betrayed in my entire life. But it wasn't just the emails that made my blood boil. It was the realization that Clara had never intended to work things out with me. She had already made up her mind. She had already chosen Elias. I was just a casualty in her plan. The fury inside me was like a wildfire, but I kept it in check. I couldn't let her see how much this hurt. I couldn't let her see that I was shattered. Instead, I made a decision. A plan. If she wanted to destroy our marriage, fine. But she was going to do it on my terms, not hers. I didn't tell her what I had found. I didn't need to. She would find out soon enough. I took a few more hours to gather everything. All the evidence, the emails, the texts, the video. I was going to make sure Elias understood the depth of his mistake. Clara had already made her choice, but I was about to make sure there was no turning back for either of them. When Clara came home that night, she walked in the door as if nothing had changed. But I wasn't the same. I was someone else now. The man who had been hurt, betrayed, was gone. What remained was someone who had learned the hard way. I wasn't going to beg for her to come back. I wasn't going to plead with her to make it right. No, I was going to show her what it meant to play with fire. I stood in front of her, the cold, calculated edge in my voice. We need to talk. Clara's face went pale, her hands gripping the doorframe as if she was already preparing for the worst. She knew something was coming. I could see it in her eyes. What do you mean? She asked, her voice trembling. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I pulled out the evidence, the emails, the video, the texts. I laid them all out in front of her, one by one, watching her face change as she realized what I had discovered. Her eyes widened, and her hand flew to her mouth. Nathan. No. I cut her off, my voice colder than ice. This is where you lose. This is where you realize that you didn't just cheat on me. You destroyed everything we had, and now, you'll see the consequences. Her eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't find any sympathy in me. Not now. Not after everything. This is just the beginning, Clara. You're not the one in control anymore. I am. Clara stood frozen, her face a mix of disbelief and terror. The room seemed to shrink around us as I laid the evidence before her, each piece like a dagger to the heart of everything we had once shared. The silence between us stretched on, thick and suffocating, with only the sound of Clara's shallow breaths filling the air. I could see her struggling to find the words, her mind racing for some form of defense, some excuse to offer. But there was nothing she could say. I had already seen everything, and now, she was the one who had to face the truth. Nathan, please, she whispered, her voice quivering as tears welled up in her eyes. I never meant for any of this to happen. I swear to you, it was a mistake. It wasn't supposed to go this far. I didn't want to hurt you, but I couldn't help myself. Elias, he made me feel alive again. I felt seen, I felt important. You were always so distant. I tried to talk to you, but you were too busy, too absorbed in your own world to notice me. I took a slow step forward, my gaze unwavering. The words she spoke only dug the knife deeper, confirming everything I had feared. But she still didn't get it. She still didn't understand the depth of what she had done. She wasn't just making excuses anymore. She was pleading for forgiveness, hoping that I would somehow absolve her of her actions. You think I don't know? I said, my voice steady, though the anger within me threatened to erupt. You think I didn't notice the way you pulled away? The way you shut me out? But this isn't just about us, Clara. This is about you choosing him over me, choosing to lie, choosing to deceive. You didn't just get lost. You threw away what we had for something that made you feel good for a moment, and now look at where we are. Her shoulders sagged, and she took a shaky breath. I was weak, Nathan. I let it happen. But I swear, I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt you. You have to believe me. I believe you, I said, the words coming out cold. I believe that you never wanted to hurt me. But I also believe that you wanted something else more. You wanted him, Clara. And you chose him over me. And now you're going to pay the price for it. The tears in her eyes spilled over, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. The woman who had stood beside me for so many years had turned into someone I didn't recognize, someone I wasn't sure I even wanted to know anymore. She had betrayed me, and no amount of crying or pleading was going to fix that. It was too late for apologies. She had made her choice. She stepped back, her face flushed with shame, but there was still that look in her eyes, the same look I had seen on her when she first met Elias. The look that said she wasn't truly sorry, not in the way I needed her to be. She was sorry she got caught. She was sorry I found out. But she wasn't sorry for what she had done. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about trying to make things right. This wasn't about salvaging our relationship. She didn't want to fix it. She didn't want to come back to me. She wanted a way out. She had already made up her mind, and I had just been too blind to see it. You're not sorry, Clara, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You're sorry because I'm not letting you get away with it. But you don't regret what you did. You regret that I caught you. Her lips trembled, but she didn't argue. There was nothing left to say. She knew I was right. Please, Nathan, she whispered again, her voice breaking. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fix this. I still care about you, but you don't love me. I cut in, my voice sharp. Not the way I loved you. Not the way I gave you everything. You love the idea of me, but not the reality. And that's the worst part, Clara. You could have been honest with me. You could have talked to me. But you chose to betray me instead. She opened her mouth to say something, but the words failed her. She was empty, hollow, just as I felt inside. And as I looked at her, the woman I once trusted more than anyone else in the world, I realized I didn't even recognize her anymore. The woman standing before me was a stranger, someone who had turned her back on everything we had built, someone who had taken everything and left me with nothing. I didn't wait for her to say anything else. I turned and walked toward the door, my mind already set on what I had to do next. There would be no reconciliation, no more second chances. This wasn't a mistake, it was a betrayal, and I wasn't going to let it go. I couldn't. But there was still one more thing I had to do, one more person who needed to understand the consequences of their actions. Elias. He needed to know exactly what he had done. He thought he could come into my life, take my wife, and walk away without any repercussions. But he was wrong, and I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had saved for just this kind of moment. The call rang once, twice, and then he picked up. Elias, I said, my voice cold and unwavering. We need to talk. There was a pause on the other end of the line before he answered, his voice casual. Nathan, what's this about? I leaned back against the wall, the fury I had been holding in threatening to spill over. You think you've won, don't you? I asked, my voice steady, though the anger was building beneath the surface. You think that because you're with Clara, everything's fine? You're wrong. I heard him laugh softly, the sound infuriating. What are you going to do about it? I smiled grimly, feeling the satisfaction of finally being in control. You'll find out soon enough. But just know this, I don't forget, Elias. And I never forgive. I will make sure you regret ever crossing me. There was silence on the other end for a moment before Elias spoke, his tone no longer so confident. You don't scare me, Nathan. You don't know who you're messing with. I think I do, I replied. And I'm just getting started. The phone call with Elias left a strange sense of calm washing over me. I could tell he didn't understand the weight of what was happening. He was so caught up in his own arrogance, in his belief that he could just waltz into my life and take whatever he wanted. But I had made it clear that I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. There was still so much left to do, so many more pieces of this puzzle to put into place. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? There was too much running through my mind, too much at stake. I needed to plan, to think, to make sure I had everything under control. And I knew I couldn't just confront Clara again. She'd already shown me who she really was. She'd chosen Elias, and I had seen her for the person she had become. No, now was the time for me to take back control, for me to show her what it really meant to betray someone who had given everything for her. The next morning, Clara was gone when I woke up. She must have gone to work, probably still believing that things could somehow go back to normal, that I would just forgive her and we could move on. But I wasn't interested in playing the role of the hurt husband anymore. No, I was playing the long game. It was time to turn the tables. I sat down at the kitchen table and started putting my plan into motion. I knew I needed to hit Elias where it would hurt the most, not just emotionally, but financially, personally. He had no idea who he was dealing with. I began making phone calls, reaching out to people I knew, some of whom had connections to Elias. He wasn't just some random guy. He had a reputation, a position in a company that was far more influential than I had realized. The more I learned about him, the more I saw how his success had been built on manipulations and backdoor deals. I wasn't about to let him get away with it, not when he thought he could just come into my life and tear it apart. It wasn't hard to find out where he would be later that week. Elias had a business meeting scheduled, one that I knew he couldn't afford to miss. I made sure to get the details, the location, the time, who would be there. This was the perfect opportunity. He wouldn't be expecting me to show up. And when I did, he would understand exactly who he had been messing with. The day of the meeting arrived, and I dressed carefully, my appearance calm, collected, and purposeful. I drove to the venue with one goal in mind: to make sure Elias felt the full weight of what he had done. I knew it would be risky. I wasn't exactly sure how he would react, or how far I could push him before things escalated. But I was done with being passive. I was done with being the victim. I arrived early, staying hidden in the shadows as I waited for him to show up. The meeting location was a fancy, upscale restaurant in the city, a place where deals were made and business was done behind closed doors. I knew Elias would be there soon, walking in like he owned the place. He always did. But this time, he wouldn't have the upper hand. This time, I was in control. As expected, Elias arrived, walking into the restaurant with an air of self-assurance. He barely noticed the people around him, too focused on his own importance. I watched him as he made his way inside, exchanging pleasantries with a few other guests, before heading toward the private dining area. He didn't see me, and that's when I made my move. I slipped inside, taking a seat at the bar, careful not to draw attention to myself. I ordered a drink, keeping my eyes on the door. I knew Elias wouldn't stay long, but I needed a few moments to execute my plan. I didn't want him to get suspicious. I needed him to feel safe, to feel like everything was normal. And when the time came, I was ready. I followed him into the private dining area, where the meeting was supposed to take place. I wasn't here to make small talk. I wasn't here to negotiate. I was here to make sure Elias understood that he had crossed a line, one he wouldn't be able to erase. I stepped into the room just as Elias was sitting down with his clients, shaking their hands, exchanging pleasantries. At first, he didn't see me, but when he turned his head, his expression shifted instantly. The surprise in his eyes quickly turned to a mix of confusion and wariness. I smiled, but there was no warmth behind it. "You," Elias said, his voice tight. "What the hell are you doing here?" I walked forward slowly, not in a rush, taking my time, savoring the moment. I could feel the tension in the room, the discomfort from the people who had just witnessed the confrontation. But I didn't care. This wasn't about them. This was about him. "You thought you could just walk into my life and take what was mine?" I asked, my voice low and controlled. "You thought I wouldn't find out? You thought I would just sit back and let you have her?" Elias opened his mouth to respond, but I raised a hand, cutting him off. "No, I've had enough of your lies. I've had enough of you thinking you can get away with whatever you want. You're going to learn the hard way, Elias. You'll learn that you don't get to do this without facing the consequences." The tension in the room was palpable now. The clients were looking between Elias and me, unsure of what to do. But I didn't care about them. I only cared about sending a message. "You've hurt me in ways you can't even begin to understand," I continued, my voice unwavering. "But I'm not the kind of man who lets things slide. I'm not the kind of man who forgets. You'll pay for this. You'll regret everything. And trust me, Elias, it's going to cost you more than you ever imagined." Elias finally found his voice, his posture stiffening as he glared at me. "You don't know what you're messing with," he spat. "You have no idea who I am." I smiled again, but this time, there was nothing friendly about it. "I know exactly who you are, and that's why you're going to regret underestimating me." The last thing I saw before I turned and walked out of the room was Elias's face, a mixture of anger and fear. I knew I had made my point, and now, I was going to make sure he paid the price. The days after my encounter with Elias felt strangely quiet, like the calm that follows a storm. I had done what I needed to do, and now, everything was out in the open. The world I had once known seemed like it was crumbling, but slowly, I was beginning to rebuild, piece by piece. I still couldn't shake the image of Clara and Elias together, but I knew deep down that what mattered now wasn't what I had lost, but what I was going to do with what remained. After that day, Clara and I barely spoke. She didn't try to reach out to me. I think she realized, deep inside, that there was no turning back. I had made it clear, not just with my words, but with my actions, that I wasn't going to be the man who waited around for an apology that would never come. I wasn't going to let her manipulation continue, and I wasn't going to let myself be a victim anymore. But then, a few weeks later, when I least expected it, something changed. Clara came to me, not with more apologies, but with something real. She had spent time reflecting on everything, on the mess she had created, and she was finally ready to take responsibility for her actions. But more importantly, she was ready to let go of the lies. It wasn't an easy conversation. We sat in silence for what felt like forever, the weight of our past hanging between us. But then, Clara spoke. "I've been thinking a lot, Nathan. About everything," she said softly. "I was wrong. I betrayed you, and I've hurt you in ways I can't take back. But I realize now that I've been running from the truth. I've been running from myself. And the truth is, I lost sight of what really mattered." I nodded, letting her words sink in. It wasn't about whether I could forgive her. It was about understanding that we were both broken in different ways, and that the healing would take time. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness," she continued, her voice cracking. I wanted you to know that I've learned. I've learned the hard way. And I'm so sorry." I sat there for a moment, the anger, the betrayal, all still fresh in my mind. But there was something else too, a sense of peace, a sense that I had finally let go of the grip I had held on to for so long. I had made my stand. I had taken control. And in doing so, I had come to realize that I didn't need her validation to be okay. "I'm not sure what to do with all of this," I said honestly, my voice steady. "But I know one thing. I'm not the man I was before. And I can't go back to being that person." Clara nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "I understand. And I don't expect things to go back to what they were. I want you to know that I've changed." And in that moment, I realized something important. I didn't need to hold on to the anger anymore. I didn't need to keep punishing myself or her. We both had our own paths to walk now, separate paths, but paths that would eventually lead us to a better place, if we were willing to let go of the past and embrace what was still ahead. The next few months weren't easy, but slowly, I began to find myself again. I focused on what I loved, what made me feel whole. I spent time with friends, reconnected with old hobbies, and started investing in my own happiness, something I had neglected for far too long. I focused on healing, on taking care of myself, and eventually, I began to find joy in life again. Clara, too, went through her own journey. She left the life she had built with Elias, a relationship that had been built on deception, and started focusing on her own growth. We didn't speak much after that, but I could see through mutual acquaintances that she was taking responsibility, making real changes in her life. It was clear she was on a different path now. And for me, I realized that, in the end, the most important thing wasn't whether I could forgive Clara or even what happened with Elias. It was that I had found strength within myself, strength I never knew I had. I had learned that sometimes, letting go is the hardest thing to do, but it's also the most freeing. I didn't need to live in the shadow of the past anymore. I didn't need to wait for someone else to fix me. I was in control of my own future now, and it was brighter than I ever imagined. The person I was becoming, the man who had the courage to face the truth, to stand up for himself, and to walk away from a relationship that no longer served him, was stronger than I had ever been. And as the days went by, I began to realize that the true victory wasn't about revenge, or about showing Clara or Elias how much they had hurt me. It was about reclaiming my life, my peace, and my happiness. I had walked through fire, but I had come out the other side unburned. And that, in the end, was the greatest triumph of all.